All right, everybody. Remember me from yesterday, Jennifer Watts. I'm with the State Museum. I'm part of the education team. So her story was really great because she first comes off right off the bat talking about historians are storytellers. And that's actually what I want to talk to you about today. So yes, we're going to talk about Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells Barnett, you know, she is one of those early women that does hyphenate her name. She doesn't fully take her husband's last name. She does hyphenate, so that's an interesting fact about her. But we are going to kind of highlight her story, basically forming it down to three main stories. I mean, her life is incredible. I could talk about her, read about her all the time. Me and Casey have had conversations about her many times. So we did try to highlight just three specific stories that kind of lead you to her progression into activism and, of course, involvement into the suffrage movement. I do want to start off with just a little bit of background information for some of you that might not be familiar with Ida B. Wells. So she technically is born in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Technically, but she's ours. We have claimed her. She is ours. She will be born July 16th of 1862 to actually enslaved parents, James Jim Wells and Elizabeth, Lizzie Warrington. They will gain their freedom, of course, after the Civil War. Her father really becomes active in the Freedmen's Bureau. He helps organize a child college, which is the goal of educating these former slaves, which is part of the transitioning of bringing them out of that, very limited institution and, bettering themselves. So a lot of African-American men and women will start attending schools like this. Ida, of course, is going to be one of them. She does attend, as well as her mother. Her mother actually goes to school with her. So she will continue on with her education, but by the time, she's in her, mid-teens, her life is really going to change dramatically. The yellow fever pandemic is coming through the South, hits New Orleans really bad, travels straight up the Mississippi to Memphis and in the surrounding area. So she will lose both her parents and one of her siblings to the yellow fever epidemic in 1878. After that, basically the family is going to be split apart. The siblings going to different households. One of her siblings is actually disabled, and they're going to institutionalize her. Ida, not going to let that happen. She's about 16 years old. She lies about her age. She says she's 18 and actually begins teaching so that she could support her family. And she actually keeps all the children together with her. Eventually, of course, she does move to Memphis. Memphis not being as hit as hard during the Civil War. So more economic opportunities are for her there. The pay is better. So she will start to work in Shelby County as a teacher. That is really where she starts seeing the effects of segregation, the separate but equal, but is it really equal? She starts writing under the pen name Iola, putting it out there about this separation. White schools are getting better materials. Here her school is, her students don't have access to those same materials. So she will continue on doing that and kind of talking about that firsthand discrimination she's experiencing. But we're going to really kind of lead you in there from that point, her early writing into the first kind of major event in her life. So I'm actually going to pull up my screen really quickly. So if y'all will just give me one moment. Okay. So we've got, from beginning. So again, who was Ida B. Wells? We do have this picture of her from our collection. It's one of my favorites because it shows her commitment to education. They're holding the book. So our first story, is going to be Ida versus the Railroad. So in September of 1883, Ida B. Wells is about 20 years old. She's traveling from Memphis to Woodstock, Tennessee for a teaching position. The train is, I found this photograph of this train to give y'all an idea of the kind of travel she would, and thankfully it actually had 2 passenger cars attached to it. The train she was actually on that day had 2 passenger cars and then 1 for luggage. On this photograph, you can see the engine, the coal, and then the 2 passenger cars. So it wasn't quite perfect, but it was close enough. So she buys the ticket, she gets on the train. She sits on the second car, so the back car. She notes later on that she's the only woman, only African-American person on the train car, but that there were plenty of seats. When they pull out of the station, the conductor comes over. The conductor will basically tell her that she needs to move. She needs to move to the forwards car, that the back car was whites only. She politely refuses. The conductor will leave. He come back a second time, reinstates, ma'am, you need to move. This is a whites only car. And she responded, she will file a lawsuit in 1884, on this incident. So it's going to be the Chesapeake, Ohio and Southwestern Railroad Company. And this is actually from TSLA. So again, shout out to the archives. So this is the first page of the actual legal notice. But in this section here, if you can see, she actually describes the event. And it was, I would not have to go to the coach in front, that I was in the wrong car. This is where she's kind of describing the incident here, that he will eventually go on to actually try to forcefully remove her. And that's really where the lawsuit's kind of focusing on. Her sleeve is actually torn, as she reports. And she will have, this lawsuit goes into like newspaper. So this is the Public Ledger of 1884, describing the incident and the conduct of the conductor. It's also interesting to note that other passengers are witnessing this activity, and you would think, like, somebody would come to her assistance. But the passengers actually, she notes in her affidavit that they actually come and help the conductor. She actually ends up leaving the train, and of course leads later on to the lawsuit. This is another one from the Nashville Daily American, also in 1884, talking about the incident. Make note that the car was also a smoking car, the first car, and it was rowdy, so that was another reason why she didn't go. So it has a lot of details. She will actually win her lawsuit, and as you can see here, was awarded $500. The railroad actually does pay this, but they also appeal it. So in 1887, it goes up to the Tennessee State Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is actually going to overturn that ruling. So this kind of, is the beginning stages of her really seeing the impact of racial injustices, not only based on race, but also beginning to based on gender. Her writing is going to increase. She eventually does lose her job as a teacher in 1891 because of her writing, but she will start writing for newspapers like the Memphis Free Speech, which she will eventually become part owner of, the New York Freedman, and the Detroit Plain Dealer. So not only here in the South, she's also writing for newspapers across the country. So that will lead me, she's doing this, she's continuing her writing activism. She actually starts going on speaking tours, which will lead me to my next story. This is another major turning point in Ida's life. So what we have here is the story that took place about a friend of hers. Her friend Tom Moss, and two other men were owners and operators of the People's Grocery, which you can actually see here in this photograph. Don't mind the cigar selling wagon in the front. There's not really, I think this might be one of the only photographs of the People's Grocery. So you can actually see the grocery store in the back. This lynching is going to take place in March of 1892. Tom Moss is actually a very dear friend of Ida's, so when he is actually lynched at that time, it really impacted her a lot, because she, not only was it a lynching of another African American man. These stories are going to be heard all throughout the South, but this one, impacts her. It hits her at home. It hits her heart. So what's really going to go at the time period, you have this grocery store. This is a cooperative grocery store, operated, owned by African American, in an area that had additional stores and grocers that were white owned. So if African Americans are in this neighborhood, they now see a store open up that's ran by African Americans, largely targeted. They're going to do their shopping there, and it starts to impact the white grocers. Now, of course, when it comes down to money, that economic jealousy is really going to kick off, and largely when the trouble is going to start brewing. William Barrett, who is one of those local businessmen in the area, one of those grocers, in early March, he actually goes to the local authorities and gets a judge to declare the People's Grocery as a public nuisance. At one point, there was some kids playing some marbles, some game, a little scuffle broke out. He kind of used that as an excuse, like, this is a social nuisance neighborhood. We need to shut it down. The judge actually deputizes him, sends him to the grocery store with other plainclothes officers. And when that happens, basically, if you start seeing somebody coming at you with weapons, you don't know what it is. There's going to be that defensive, and in the process of defending their store and these men trying to basically attack it, several of those white plainclothes officers are going to be injured. This is going to set it off. These Calvin McDowell and William Stewart will be kind of determined gang leaders of this mob of men, and they will be taken to jail there in Shelby County. On March 9th, a group of masked men do go into the jail. They kind of trick one of the guards, the jailers at the time, and they get access to them. They pull these men out. This here is an article from the Memphis Appeal, kind of talking about the situation of that, as you can see, the bloody riot that led to them going into jail. But these masked men will go into the jail. This again from the Memphis Appeal, in the next day after the lynching, kind of depicting the event. These some reports saying there were up to like 70, 75 masked men that pull them out. Here's the Roanoke Times, also from the next day, talking about it, where the men were taken to an open field near the Wolf River and lynched by firing squad, and basically left where they fell. This will become known as the lynching at the Curve. That area where the store was located was going to be located on a curve of the road. So this made a really big impact emotionally for Ida B. Here is actually the widow of Tom Moss, as you can see here. This is his daughter, who was a small child at the time, and then this is his son, Thomas Jr. He wasn't even born. He was born after his father's death in 1893, and of course his wife will name him in remembrance of his father. And of course, this photograph, to me, why I wanted to include it is it puts a face, like, the impact of lynching. You know, the family left behind, that poor little boy never going to be able to meet his own father. The city of Memphis has now placed up a marker at the site of the grocery in commemoration and memory of the men that were lynched that day in March of 1892. But these atrocities really get her to start speaking out more and more. She starts doing research on lynching, which leads me to my first primary source. This is one that she published in 1895. So if you'll just give me a moment, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and go to the website so that you can actually see this. I will let you know while I'm doing this that this piece of information is not going to be something that you readily want to use with younger children, or be mindful of your younger students. It does go into graphic detail of numbers, specifics, but this is actually done by the Gutenberg Project on ebooks, so it is available for you to go online. I do have a bibliography in the Google Drive that will have some of these listed, but it has chapter base, and it covers basically about 3-year span, the lynching of imbeciles, lynching of innocent men. So she kind of speaks about specific cases. And the reasons for this, scapegoats. Ooh, I will not show that. There are some images in it as well. So again, I want to just kind of highlight that this is not something necessarily you want to use for younger students to show visually, but it can provide you some background information. But I liked chapter 10 where she starts to talk about the remedy. So I definitely would encourage you to kind of take a look at this, specifically speaking out. What can we do to prevent lynching, to thwart anarchy, and promote law and order throughout our land? And she goes through and lists several things here. So this is a really good resource. It's called the Red Record. Again, it will be provided in the Google Drive that we are going to be sending out. Kelly will be sending out a little later on. But one thing that she kind of quotes, and that lynching was used as an excuse to get rid of Negroes who are acquiring wealth and property and thus keep the race terrorized. That's kind of a takeaway that she took from this, because a lot of these lynchings, like the one that she personally experienced with her friend, is going to be motivated by those types of feelings. Now, I would like to kind of go into a little bit more about my next story. The next story, of course, is going to lead to Ida and the Votes for Women, as I like to call it. So by this point, she is largely going to be active. She's writing immensely about it. She's going on speaking tours, and actually she was out of the state at the time of the lynching, and a few months later in May of 1892, she actually her store, her newspaper store and printing office on Beale Street was actually attacked by some of these angry mobs, destroyed, and she was warned not to return to Memphis. If she did, that she too would be lynched. So at that point, when Ida will leave the state, basically never to return, she will move up north. She will be in New York, eventually makes her way to Chicago. In Chicago, her activism in the women's suffrage movement is going to come forth, because she's starting to realize that what better way to make the changes to stop lynching, to stop racial injustices, to stop, the discrimination, not only for her race, but her gender, is voting. So she will get more active in the suffrage parade, or suffrage program and processions and ideas and gets active in that. From that point on, she will go in and write more about how enfranchisement could stop lynching. So once again, here's another resource that you can use. I'd like to share that with you as well. So this is actually from the Library of Chicago collection, also available online. So it's from the original Rights magazine. So this is the front cover, and if I scroll through, it lists the different contents of the different articles, and then you can see here Ida B. Wells. So we've kind of just focused on that, and this kind of gives the communication on how voting can make the changes, can stop lynching, can, using their voice, and why this is so much important to her. So this is another good resource. Due to time, I'm kind of not going to scroll through too much of it, but that also will be available for you to take a look at with that Google Drive. So I do recommend that resource. It's very interesting to go through. But as I said, Ida B. Wells will get more so involved in the women's suffrage movement. In Chicago, she will actually help form the Alpha Suffrage Club in about 1913. And the reason why she organizes this club is she was not really allowed, as we mentioned before, because of her race, she is not allowed to fully participate in the National American Women's Suffrage Association. She's actually friends with Susan B. Anthony, very good friends. But because of her race, she's not allowed to fully participate. So she organizes this additional club, the Alpha Suffrage Club, with actually 2 other white suffragists. So they will get organized pretty early, soon before Alice Paul with the National American Women's Suffrage Association Constitutional Union. So this is prior, this is 1913, so this is prior of Alice Paul separating and forming the National Women's Party. But Alice Paul goes on to produce this parade, procession, if you will, in Washington, D.C. So this is actually the official program. I believe we have one of these in our collection, if I'm not mistaken, but you can easily find it. I love the color, the capital, just the symbology in it. The symbolism is really amazing, kind of heralding the women through. And she will actually be in, her and about 60 of the Alfred Suffrage Club women will travel to D.C. Now, when they get to D.C., they pretty much are notified that they are not going to be able to fully participate in the parade. The leadership of the National American Women's Suffrage Association kind of trickles the information down. They actually produce an article in the Women's Journal, their official newspaper, and want to segregate the parade, basically. They didn't want to offend Southern suffragists who will be coming up to participate as well. So they made the decision to segregate. So it was given the job of Grace Wilbur Trout, who was the president of the Illinois delegation, to actually inform Ida and her group that they will be able to participate, but they would have to march in the back of the line. So the line was very much designed and laid out. As you can see here, this is actually printed in the New York Evening Journal, kind of giving you an idea of how they're going to break it down. So we do have Miss Aneza Milholland, who will be the leader. She's the one on the white horse that you see a lot of photographs of. But they have it breaking down to officers of the association, nations are going to be represented, teachers, business women. So they're kind of delegated to certain sections, states, organizations, things of that nature. So Ida's told they will have to separate. Many of those African American suffragists basically fall in line, to use a parade term. They fall in line and they will march in the back. This includes another Tennessean, Mary Church Terrell, which many of you, I think, might be familiar with her. I think we might have mentioned her a couple times. Ida's a little different. Ida kind of takes the information in stride. She will actually incorporate herself into the crowd of spectators. As you can see, a lot of people are turning out for this event. This is being held on March 3rd, the day before the inauguration of President Woodrow Wilson. So there's also a lot of people in town for that event, but the spectacle of it is also going to draw a crowd. So as the procession continues down the avenue, the different groups, the different members are marching past. It will come to a point where the Illinois women will come up in line. And this is like the part of the story that gives me chills. So what she actually does is, as the Illinois delegation is marching past, Ida, very, very cool and calm, simply just slides right on in, and she will march with the Illinois women. Now, thankfully for us today, there was actually a photographer who was there at the precise moment, like perfect moment, and captured this photograph of Ida B. Wells right there marching with the Illinois delegation. Not only is she marching, but she almost appears like she's marching in the front of the line. Like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be right here. I'm going to march with the women of Illinois. I'm going to march right in front. So this was produced by the Chicago Daily Tribune and was published on March 5th, so a few days later. But these are the types of stories that kind of are impactful and show you how the life experiences of Ida B. Wells kind of drew her into the suffrage movement, led her to the cause and to fight for change. As Casey mentioned the other day, Ida is pretty much the only one that went from the early stages of the movement, lived through those, was friends with Susan B. Anthony, actually made it through 1920 and was actually able to vote. Not as a lot of the early suffragists and activists do get that opportunity to make that transition to honest voters who can make that change. So I really kind of am inspired by her. I know a lot of people are. A lot of her activities will lead on to, you know, the civil rights movement in the 1960s. The story of her on the train can be a comparison you can use with your students to Rosa Parks and the bus. So you can kind of compare the different, you know, modes of transportation. You can take it in all different directions. But my favorite thing is just simply, after discussing, you know, and writing these three stories, I simply looked at it as, asked myself the question, who was Ida? And these are the words that I came up with. See what your students would say if you ask this question themselves. So I came up with fighter, loyal friend, activist, reformer, advocate, organizer, leader, and most important, inspirational. So if you have any other questions or anything, I would be more than happy to answer those. I'll stop sharing my screen now. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat bar. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, though. So thank you so much. I hope that kind of gave you a little bit more of an insight about who Ida B. Wells was, what kind of was her driving force of her experiences, and hopefully she's just as inspirational to you as she is to me. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That was fantastic. It's clear we've got a lot of Ida B. Wells fans by the chat. Everybody loves her, and we do too. And she is, you know, as Kira mentioned, a very important story that we should share more with students and young people. So let us know if there's any way we can help you guys with that. you
I
know.
do have one thing I forgot to mention. Ida's great granddaughter, I'm going to do a little book plug here. Her name's Michelle Duster. She's actually produced a book about her ancestor that should be coming out February of 2021. So if you have a little Ida book collection like I do, it's called Ida B. the Queen. Just going to end it there.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, it's time for a break now. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Welcome back. Thanks, everybody, for coming back after break and coming back for day 2. I'm going to turn things over to Casey, who is going to walk us through a really fun activity, looking a little more closely at some of the primary sources that you all have seen this morning through Carol's presentation and others as well. So Casey, you ready to go?
Yeah. Hi, guys. You're back with me again. I'm Casey. I'm from the State Library and Archives. I know we've seen a lot of really great people over the last 2 days. So this activity that we're going to do, if you've been with us before in one of our physical workshops that we've had throughout the year, you might have done this. It's our Suffrage Showdown, an escape room adventure. Escape rooms are getting really popular nowadays, especially in history classes. Can you guys use your reactions and show me if any of y'all have actually used any kind of breakouts before in your classrooms? I know that Tracy, you've got some really great ones I've looked at before. Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, Haley, I see you down there. That's awesome. All right, y'all. So this is something we thought we should embark on as well. And usually when we're in physical, we actually use our archival boxes and we use primary sources and we manipulate them in all sorts of fun ways and have our teachers kind of go through the physical unlocking of the boxes, trying to figuring out all the codes and stuff. So this is just an example of what we actually do in person. So you'll actually get both versions when we send that Google Drive. You'll get both the physical and our digital, which is what we're gonna do today. So what I want y'all to go ahead and do, click on this link right up here if you're able to. I'm also gonna put it in the chat. And that is gonna take you to our digital escape room. And the Google Drive will have it so you can make any kind of additions that you need to fit your classroom. But for now, I wanna give you guys a few minutes. I'm gonna give you about 6 or 7 minutes. I'm gonna time you to see if you guys can kind of work your way through it. If anyone gets stuck, feel free to message me privately and I might give you a hint or two to help you out. But yeah, go ahead and get started. Tom, you can't access it. Is anyone else having trouble accessing it? If so, just say something in the chat. We'll try to see if there's any kind of struggles. Tom, are you at school? Because we did have a group in our last workshop that wasn't able to access it because it is a Google form. So if your school doesn't allow you to access Google Classroom or anything like that, that could be a problem. All right, I'm not seeing any other issues. Let me know if you do. Kelly and I are both watching the chat. While you guys get started on that, I also have a fun little treat. One of our amazing archivists at TSLA, who has been a huge part in collecting items for suffrage and protecting those documents. She has created a really, really great suffrage 1920 playlist on Spotify that we can definitely give y'all if you want access to it. So I'm gonna play that in the background so it's not this awkward quiet. Get started, y'all.
Weary years of wandering o'er, we greet with joy this radiant shore, the promised land of liberty, the dawn of freedom's morn we see. Oh, promised land, we enter in with peace on earth, goodwill to men. The golden age now comes again, as breaketh every bond and chain, while every race share in this glad time. Toilers in many fields have come with sheaves for this our harvest home, while spirits true in every age have won for us this heritage. Oh, golden dawn, oh, promised day, when error's lost in truth's clear ray, when all shall know that God is love, His kingdom here around above, the world one equal brotherhood, and evil overcome with good. Then onward march in truth's crusade, earth's faltering ones implore our aid. The children of our schools and state, this coming of the mother's weight. Oh, doubting hearts, oh, tempted ones, the shadows fade, the sunshine comes, freedom for each is best for all, the golden rule, our bugle call, and as to victory on we move, the banner over us is love.
About halfway, y'all.
I've been down to Madison to see the folks and sights. You'd laugh, I'm sure, to hear them talk about the women's rights. Now it's just as plain as my old hat, as plain can be, that if the women want the vote, they'll get no help from me. Not from Joe, not from Joe, if he knows it, not from Joseph, no, not from Joe, not from me, I tell you, no.
Say, friend Joseph, why not we should vote as well as you? Are there no problems in this state that need our wisdom too? We must pay our taxes same as you, as citizens be true. And if some wicked thing we do, to jail we're sent by you. Yes, we are, same as you, and you know it, don't you, Joseph? Yes, you do, yet you boast you'll not help us win the vote.
But dear woman, can't you see your home is your true sphere? Just think of going to the polls, perhaps 2 times a year. You are wasting time you ought to use in sewing and at work. Your home neglected all those hours. Would you such duty shirk? Help from Joe, if he knows it, not from Joseph. No, not from Joe, not from me, I tell you, no.
1 minute to
Joseph, tell
go.
us something new. We're tired of that old song. We'll sew the seams and cook the meals. To vote won't take us long. We will help clean house, the one too large for man to clean alone. The state and nation, don't you see? When we the vote have won, yes we will, and you'll help, for you'll need our help, friend Joseph. Yes you will, when we're in, so you'd better help us win.
You're just right how blind I've been. I ne'er had seen it thus. 'Tis true that taxes you must pay without a word or fuss. You are subject to the laws men made, and yet no word or note can you sing out where it will count. I'll help you win the vote. Yes, I will.
Thank you, Joe.
We'll together
Soon be voters, yes we will. If you'll all vote yes at the polls next fall.
Perfect timing on ending on that slightly hokey song. And so we are actually going to go through this together. I know some people might have had trouble with Jigsaw Planet. especially if they're at a school. So we're still working on this. We're hoping to do more kind of breakout rooms. And so we're still trying to figure out which one works best for us. But for now, I figure if you guys had any trouble or you got stuck, we're gonna go through it together so you can see what it looks like. And then we're gonna explore the primary sources in it a little bit more. So this should be your opening screen. Looks like you guys can all see it. And we're gonna go ahead and click next. Now here it talks about making a puzzle, and that might have been where you guys got stuck for some of you. But if you were able to complete the puzzle, this is what you should have seen. It's called enfranchisement now means the sky's the limit in the women's sphere. We can tell from this, and my question's gonna ask it in just a little bit, it is a political cartoon. Do you guys think it was pro-suffrage or anti-suffrage? Go ahead and write that in the chat so I can see that. Pro-suffrage, anti-suffrage, pro, yeah, it's a pretty positive political cartoon, right? It starts down there, if you guys can see, it says slavery at the very bottom. We've got definitely a farm girl, probably so definitely a working woman. She's starting at slavery, and if you go all the way to the tippy top, it says presidency, and along the ladder, there's different steps for her to get to that ultimate freedom and equality. So it's definitely a pro-suffrage political cartoon. So we can go down here and click pro-suffrage. When we do that, we get Jonah Hill being super excited for us here because we're moving on. What kind of primary source is this document? We already kind of talked about it a little bit. It's probably not an Instagram story, but it might be a political cartoon. And when we do that, we get Jimmy and Elmo being real excited for us, doing us a little dance. All right, so here is that primary source in its entirety. So without it being all puzzled up. Down here, there's a couple more questions that we have to answer in order to digitally unlock. So the first question is to count the number of rungs on the ladder. So if you were able to do that, which even in person, Kelly and I whip out, magnifying glasses to count them all up. But Natalie's got it right, exactly, it's 28. So we know that one. And then if we count up the number of rungs, that's arts, crafts, and sciences, which should be this one, number 9 right here. So we have number 9. So we've got two digits. We've got 28, we've got 9. All right. Kelly, I think Wes wants the link directly, so if you could send that to him, that'd be awesome. All right, so like I said, the lock number 1 was how many rungs? And we know that it was 28. Then we already know which number was arts, crafts, and sciences. It was 9. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, and it lets us go through. And with that, we have a new primary source. So we've completed that ladder one, we're moving on. We've got this really great document, not gonna lie, probably my favorite in all of our suffrage collection, and it's actually not a pro-suffrage document. I really love it because you see you have a little hen here with a Votes for Women sash, and she says to a rooster who is sitting on top of these eggs, he says, "Why, Ma, these eggs will get all cold." And she says, "Sit down on them yourself, old man, my country calls me." So this is a really, really great political cartoon, but some of the words are taken out. We've redacted some of them. And so part of your activity here would be to use this word bank and try to figure out which one is going to fit in each redacted word. And so once you've done all of that, you're going to go down here and you're going to figure out how many letters are in the 5th redacted word. And we're going to start at the top and work our way down. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says here that the effect of the social revolution, meaning women voting, on American character will be to make blank of American men. And so if I scroll down here, I've got a lot of different options. Emily said sissies. Natalie's telling me the answer. This is awesome. Great, Amber. Exactly. So we're all for sissies. It seems that way, which you guys have counted up. It's 7 in that word. So we'll go ahead and click it. Yeah, and it lets us keep on going. So it looks like we've done a good job so far. We've got 3 questions, 3 locks that we have to unlock. And the first one here says, how many redacted spaces are there in the document? Is anyone able to see how many of those white spaces are there? We've got 10, 9, 9. I think we have a general consensus on 9. So we'll try 9. Looks like it's happy. In case you guys want to see what would happen if we did it wrong, it's not going to let us do it. It's going to tell us to count again. So let's go back and try 9. All right, it's happy with 9. So then the next one is all about these eggs here. How many eggs, excluding this cracked one right here, how many eggs are in that basket? We got 12 eggs from Amber. We got 12 from Heather. Lee says 12. All right, this is a consensus. I like this. Let's try it. 12. 12 is happy. All right, guys, then you know the last question. Is it pro or anti-suffrage? Or what is suffrage? What are we even talking about here? Anti-suffrage. Yeah. Let's see. Ah, and perfect. We've got a little happy avocado telling us we're doing a good job. All right, let's keep on going. Here's our last document. It's a newspaper. It's really fantastic. It's one of my favorites because it's talking about the National Women's Party, whose banner, whose flag is right behind me, if you guys haven't seen it before, minus the little stars on here that Amazon put on. So let's go down here. If you were able to open up this document, you would see who was the president of the Tennessee Women's Suffrage Association. Yeah, Amber. Amber's got it. It's right up here, right? Mrs. Leslie Warner. If you got that wrong and said you said Josephine Pearson, you should get a notification that actually tells you what the name is, just reverse. So it should be a little bit easier for your students. So we're gonna try Leslie Warner. Looks like it's happy. Who was the National Women's Party president? Let's see, we got Alice Paul, Carrie Chapman Catt. So close, Sarah. She's the other party. Alice Paul. Yeah, let's try Alice Paul. And it looks like it's pretty happy with that answer. So then our last question, our final lock to break out of the escape room, is what tactics did the National Women's Party use for suffrage rallying? Does anyone know? You might not have had a chance yet to read this whole picket. Yeah, Sue, great job. Exactly. It is picketing. That was their big thing. So let's see if we got it all right. It looks like we did. Our suffragists are marching for us because we finally escaped. You can hit submit, and that's it. That's a really quick little suffrage escape room. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint so we can see exactly what kind of sources we're looking at here. So this is that first one that I mentioned, and like we talked a lot about, it is pro-suffrage. And it's actually coming from one of my favorite collections that we have. This is coming from Carrie Chapman Catt. Does anyone know where she's from? What state she was from? Hey, good job, Melanie. Yeah, she's actually from Iowa. She is not a Southerner whatsoever, but she is the president of the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1920. So she comes down in July. She's only expecting to stay a few days. She ends up staying several weeks. She is embattled in this essentially war, right, for suffrage. And she's staying at that Hermitage Hotel, just like Carol showed us. And so everyone is staying at the exact same place right here at that Hermitage Hotel because it's one of the closest and only hotels to the Capitol. So, we've got people on both sides staying at the same place. We've got some really, really great oral histories at the archives from a woman named Abby Crawford Milton, who was a pro-suffragist here in Tennessee. And she talks about how both Carrie Chapman Catt and other women were at this hotel, and there would be, these nights of drunkenness and brawling and just immense craziness in a time where, prohibition has passed. We are not supposed to be drinking alcohol. And so this is a really great, fun story. And we're really lucky to have Carrie Chapman Catt's collection at the archives with these great political cartoons because she, like we mentioned, she's from Iowa. So when she gave away her collection, her papers, which everyone knew even in 1920 that these were going to be a big deal. I mean, people from the Library of Congress were already asking for her and Alice Paul's papers before suffrage even passed. So these people knew it early on that these papers were going to be important. So we're only one of 4 places in the whole US that have these papers or have a portion of them. So we're really lucky to have them. The next one, like I mentioned, one of my favorite sources here. It's coming from a woman that you already know. It is coming from Josephine Pearson. I'm waiting for it to flip over. I don't know if it's, there we go. So yeah, this is coming from Josephine Pearson. I know that Carol already talked about her. She's this one right here in that angelic white pristine dress, because we're talking about women being pure. And like Carol mentioned, her whole goal is to save the South from the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, save the South from the federal government coming in and taking over again like they did after the Civil War. This is what she sees as her mission. And what's interesting about Josephine, what I am thankful for, is that she kept really good records of both pro and anti-suffrage materials. So when, in the 1930s, after she is lost, she actually donates her entire collection to the State Library and Archives. And a lot of times we get questions about, what happened to Josephine? What happened to other women like Josephine who didn't want the right to vote, right? They lost, but that also means they get the right to vote. What did they do with that? Well, actually they voted. A lot of them voted, and they voted for the men who voted against suffrage. So what it really comes down to with suffrage and women voting, a lot of it comes down to racism and Black women voting. A lot of Southern white women, Southern white men didn't want Black women to have the right to vote. So once women do have the right to vote, those anti-suffragists use their vote to put men in office that are going to further restrict Black voting. All right, and our next one, our last one, this is coming from Albert Roberts' Governor Papers. Specifically, they're talking about the National Women's Party, because these two parties, they went about getting suffrage in different ways. They were trying to, one was trying to get a national amendment passed, and the other one was trying to go state by state. Some are picketing, some are writing letters to their state representatives, some are being jailed, right? So they're very different tactics here. And we've talked about her a little bit, but I absolutely love her, so we're going to talk about her again. This lady right here is Miss Sue Shelton White from Henderson, Tennessee. She is the National Women's Party delegate here in Tennessee. So she is that representative. We've talked about how she, gets jailed for burning the president in effigy. So we're really lucky to have her and to be able to talk about her from that National Women's Party perspective. The last little bit that I just wanted to share with y'all, a little fun thing, because I think Lee brought him up the last time we had a workshop. But this is my pupper. This is little Obi-Wan. Today is his adoptive anniversary, so as close as a birthday as we'll get for him. So I'm just gonna put in a little plug here while he got to be Harry Byrne on the 99th anniversary last August. But for now, I think I want to pass it over unless anyone has questions. I'm watching the chat. So if you guys do have any questions about our escape room, or if you guys want to see more of these, because we would love to make more of them because they're super fun to make, just let us know. Again, we're always trying to adapt with you guys as you guys have to adapt. But with that, I believe I'm going to turn it back over to Kira, and she's going to tell us all about the really great resources that Teaching with Primary Sources from MTSU has.
Thank you, Casey.
I think I have to stop sharing.
Yeah. So hopefully yesterday afternoon you guys had a chance to look through some of the material in the shared Google folder and hopefully run across the list of resources that was in one of those folders. So I want to take a moment to kind of point out some things on that list and show you what you will find when you look at those. So let me pull that up. All right, so as you can see here, here's our schedule. So when you're looking at that shared Google folder, in the founding documents and the West folder, there is a listing here of women's suffrage resources from our TPS MTSU program. And when you open that, it is essentially this list right here. And these are some of the best things that we have developed over the years, really dealing with women's suffrage. both looking at Tennessee, but also that larger national story. And I wanted to point out a few of these that we haven't referenced, and just kind of mention what is in some of these, as well as a couple of new things that the Library of Congress has developed over the last couple years. So all of the things here at the top are things that can be found on our TPS MTSU website, which of course you can go to just mtsu.edu/TPS or Google Teaching with Primary Sources MTSU to find our website. We did redesign the site a couple years ago, and so you'll see again how to navigate everything over on the left-hand side. And again, if you've looked at it, I will, straight up, the search function on it does not work very well. The platform that the Walker Library adapted for their entire system, of which we fall under, the searching function on this platform just isn't that great, unfortunately. So I just like to warn people if they use that search box. I don't think it works that well. So a couple things to find. The lesson plan and activity that Layla took us through yesterday, this Women's Suffrage in the West, is of course posted here on our homepage right now. But if you go to our lesson plan section, the U.S. History of Reconstruction to Modern America, under the progressive areas, where you're going to find most of the lesson plans that we have for women's suffrage. And so, for example, let's see here, you'll see that Women's Suffrage in the West. Again, that's the one that Layla took us through yesterday, with the links to the two student packets, the upper elementary and middle school and the high school packet. I saw some people had mentioned in the comments about, Iron-Jawed Angels and more about the National Women's Party. I did a lesson plan on this several years ago, and so that can be found here, the Civil Disobedience and the National Women's Party for 5th and high school. It does incorporate clips from the movie Iron-Jawed Angels, but then for the second day of the activity, where you get into kind of the forced feedings of what happens after they were imprisoned, there is an optional different piece that you can do with 5th grade, because sometimes those clips can be a little intense for younger students. And then we have an older lesson plan that Rebecca Bird from East Tennessee did for us many years ago on women's suffrage, A More Perfect Union, Women's Suffrage, and the Constitution. So there are those 3 lesson plans that you can find on our website. We also have a couple of newsletters that you'll find on that listing there. We've done 2 volumes over the year. They have different lesson ideas in them and lots of links. I would encourage you to take a look at those. And we have a couple different primary source sets, Women's Suffrage Across America and Women's Suffrage in Tennessee. And you can find those again here under that primary source sets tab. The one for Women's Suffrage Across America is here, Reconstruction to Modern America, and you can just scroll down to find that. Right, I think I must pass it. There it is. Women's Suffrage Across America is located right there. Now we also have a lesson plan that I didn't mention that is Expanding Citizenship, that also has some women's suffrage stuff in it. It's some more of a comparative piece between what was happening with women's suffrage, what's happening with the fight for African American civil rights, and then also what's happening with the struggle for American Indians to gain citizenship. All between kind of 1865 and 1965, and kind of compares those 3 different groups and kind of what they were doing during that 100-year period. And that's on our lesson plans page. So let me show you just what you can find in all right. So are you guys seeing my primary source set? Give me a thumbs up. All right, thanks, Casey. So the primary source set, you'll see the first page. Again, you have a historical background, some links here, collections that you might want to look at, other useful links. And then it's divided up. You'll see that different pages have different headings. So for example, the first 50 years, so in that early efforts to gain women's suffrage, Seneca Falls, and those kind of events and people, information about the anti-suffragists, and so links and different documents there. The state-by-state efforts that's been mentioned, so you'll see different sources that we have related to that, including this one that we looked at yesterday. 1913, and again, you guys have seen a couple of these sources already today, but you can find how to access those. Picketing in prison, so again, the efforts of the National Women's Party, and the Library of Congress has their collections, and so there's tons of great source material that you could find about them from the Library of Congress. And then, of course, once ratification happens, them celebrating victory, and so some different sources related to that. So this primary source set, again, is kind of looks from the very beginning of the fight for women's suffrage up through the actual ratification of the amendment. And then we also have a links guide. So say that you have found kind of what you're looking for in the primary source set, or we didn't have a lesson plan on what you're looking for. We did a links guide a few years ago that's got links to the different collections. And again, the Library of Congress has quite a bit on the fight for women's suffrage. So they have the Votes for Women, selections from the National American Women's Suffrage Association collection, by popular demand, Votes for Women's Suffrage pictures, the National American Women's Suffrage Association scrapbook collection, the National Women's Party, the photo collection that they have for them. And then, of course, in Chronicling America, you have lots of different newspapers that will have coverage of the fight for women's suffrage. The America's Story pages, this is going to be really good for your elementary and your middle school students, has several different articles related with content related to women's suffrage. There's some timelines that you can look at, some different exhibits, and I'm going to show you the new exhibit that they have just done that's still up at the Library of Congress, and then some different presentations that's available. And then we also, for this particular one, went through and pulled some different sites that are listed under the National Register that have HABs, which is the Historic American Building Survey, that have some information from them the Library of Congress has in that collection. So you can see, again, some of these sites and information and links for information about those particular sites. Different essays, teaching resources, and then some contemporary websites and organization, and then a couple of movies that are available. So again, this has got tons of information in this links guide. It's really a good place if you want to do some research or have students do research projects on women's suffrage. You can let them use this links guide as a really good research tool. So let's see, let me now go back to, all right, so you guys should be seeing our TPS MTSU site again. Is that what everybody's seeing? All right, great. So let me show you first off the exhibit that the Library of Congress did most recently. This is Shall Not Be Denied, Women Fight for the Vote. And again, this exhibit is up through September, and they may, I don't know, they may extend it given that their facilities were closed for a while. But you can definitely look at it online. You can explore the exhibit. You can see the different sections that they have. So again, this is telling that broader national story. So you can start with the very beginning. One thing I love about the online exhibits that the Library of Congress does is that you have all of the items and the text that you see if you were actually physically visiting the Library of Congress, but you actually can look at those online. So again, you have these text excerpts that they have from some of the different items. We can look at some of these. And so, if we're looking at, some of these items, we can pull it up in a full screen. And let's see, sorry, the way that Zoom does this, it kind of hides some of my buttons. So again, it's a really good, they have a partial transcript that's there for this. So you definitely want to kind of take a moment to kind of look through what they have for these different sections. Now, my favorite thing that they have done with this exhibit, and let me get back to where I can find that. Let me go back once more. Find the different sections again. More to the movement. They really wanted to make an effort to show that, too oftentimes we talk about the women's suffrage movement, we focus on the white women who were involved. But there were so many other women of, different ethnicities who played a part, and we have not told their stories to the same level that we've told the stories of, Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Catt and those folks. And so they have this section, More to the Movement, where they've pulled together some of these different women that, again, we may not be as familiar with their names. And so that you can click on these folks, you can see an image of them and get a little blurb about who they were. And so then you can use that, of course, to start to do a little more research about these women and their contributions. So I thought that that was a really cool piece that they did to this exhibit. Again, trying to highlight and bring up other women's names that, again, beyond just the handful that that we typically see that are in curriculum standards and in our textbooks. So definitely, I would encourage you guys to take a look at this section. They have some different interactives. The video that you guys saw yesterday that had trouble loading, that is part of this exhibit, and that's available under the multimedia. So you can see there's that video there that you can use with your students. That's a couple minutes long. It's a nice little overview piece for the exhibit. So definitely take some time to explore this. Even once the exhibit comes down at the Library of Congress, this webpage and the online exhibit will remain up. So again, this is something that you can definitely build into what you're doing with your students. All right, and the other thing that I want to show you that is really cool that the Library of Congress has is this research guide. And again, this is listed on that Google Doc with all of the different links. They do research guides for some, key legislative pieces, some key people, and 19th Amendment is one that they have one of these guides for. And so you can see there's an introduction. We have links to the actual text for the 19th Amendment. So we see both of that. So that's going to be in the congressional records. We have some different images, newspapers that are kind of highlighted here. You'll see there's a tab for digital collections. And again, that's going to pull in some of those various collections that they have. And again, they have so many collections that touch on women's suffrage topics that are going to be highlighted here. You can see with the Chronic America, they've actually pulled in some sample articles. So you don't actually have to dig through newspapers to try to find really great articles. You can actually just hear some prime examples. They have the Mary Church Terrell papers, which I think one of our speakers here in just a little bit is going to talk to us more about her. The National American Women's Suffrage Association, their collections, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, that collection's there, printed ephemera, the Susan B. Anthony papers. Again, so much stuff that is here and available through the Library of Congress. So all of those digital collections. They're related online resources. So again, this is going to be where you're going to find the links to the America's Library stuff, things that they have within congress.gov, the exhibits, prints and photographs, some other research guides that might be related, things from the teacher's page. And then lastly, today in history, which is going to be better for your high school students and your upper middle school students. And then they have links to some external websites that are also going to have some good material related. So you can see, again, lots of different directions that you can go using these research guides without having to do a lot of just general searching within the Library of Congress. So I would definitely encourage you guys to take a look at these. If you have questions, let us know. And something to keep in mind with some of the overall, like personal papers of people, the collections that they have, they are doing a project right now, crowdsourcing transcriptions for some of these. And I'm fairly certain, I know the Mary Church Terrell papers were one of those collections, and I feel like another one of these wasn't here right off, which it was, and maybe Elizabeth Cady Stanton papers, are ones that they are actually working on. They're crowdsourcing and having people transcribe and help them transcribe these so that when you are actually looking at the original documents that you can have a transcription available. I know for students, that is really important. So definitely keep that in mind. If you run across something that there's not currently a transcription, that they are working on that. And if you happen to be, have students that you would be interested in kind of having them go through this process, you can actually participate in that crowdsourcing transcription process. If you're interested in that, let Stacy and I know when we can kind of get you information on how to find that, because it is a really cool project and definitely something you could do with students and to have that be as a class effort. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat box to see if we have any questions. Yeah, so the link to, and I'm assuming you're meaning to our website, we'll drop that in the chat. And then also don't forget that everybody should have, if not already, that you will be joining the TPS Teachers Network so you can upload your lesson plan. And keep in mind, in that group is in the album section is where you can find all of those close reading exercises that Stacy has been doing. And she recently did one for Ida B. Wells in the Red Record. And so that's another, we have two that relate to women that we've talked about in the course of this workshop. So definitely, make sure that you look at those. So that's just kind of a quick piece about some of the resources that we have. Again, if you guys have questions or looking for things, specific things, feel free to reach out to Stacy and I. We're always happy to kind of help point people in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kelly. I think it's time for us to have our second break.